Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this session on unlocking resources for Indigenous communities to access and use Earth observations, data and tools. This session is being curated by the Geo Indigenous Alliance, working together with Cultural Survival. I'm sitting in Glasgow. I've been at the COP for it feels like the last year, but it's only the last sort of 10 days. And we've heard a lot of stuff coming out of COP about, over $1 billion going to Indigenous communities. But I guess we want to explore, how do we get access to some of this money? What does it mean? So we're going to explore the critical role that Indigenous peoples play in designing solutions to the climate crisis and those resources that are needed to ensure that no person is left behind, which is obviously also linked to the UN 2030 agenda and long-term sustainable development. We will have a number of Indigenous experts who will be discussing the need for collaboration, which again has been a big topic at COP26 all week, to unlock those same resources that we mentioned in the event title. First of all, we're going to have some opening remarks. And to open the event, I'd like to welcome James Rattlingleaf Sr. from the Rosebud Sioux Tribe and the Geo Indigenous Alliance. Are you there, James?
I am, and greetings, everybody. Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. And let me begin by welcoming you to the session in the Lakota language. We say, "Hamidakiapi, Tanya Yahipi, James Rattlingleaf Machapi Nasuchang Lakota Oyate." I want to welcome you and greet you with a good heart and a handshake. As Stephen mentioned, we're really happy and proud that this session was approved by the COP26 organizing committee. And we're so happy that you're here with us, both as the audience and listeners, but also to our presenters. As Stephen mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of the Geo Indigenous Alliance. And the Alliance was established in 2019 in Canberra, Australia at the Geo Ministerial Summit. And when we got together there 2 years ago, it came upon us that we should develop an Indigenous focused effort that would bring the Earth observation, data and science technology to Indigenous communities and more effective, respectful, reciprocal ways. And so 2 years later, we find ourselves today here with you at COP26, confronting and embracing the challenges of climate change. We know that resources are an important part of the solution. And I was not there with you today, but I was watching and listening to these statements and these commitments made by international bodies, seeking the role of Indigenous people and our knowledges. So today, we're happy and honored to have our speakers come and present to us about the importance of Indigenous participation, but also how do we do this work more effectively. I want to also especially welcome Assistant Secretary Tanya Trujillo to our group as well. And we're so happy that DOI is here with us today. Secretary Holland really made history this past year, couple of years, when she was appointed the Secretary of Interior. Really, for the first time, an Indigenous woman was put into that position of authority and power. And we're looking for continuing her leadership in how we do this work together as Indigenous people, but how we work together with philanthropy, how do we work together with science organizations, data providers, all those organizations that now have a special role, an important role in bringing together climate solutions. We acknowledge again the importance of groups like Stephen here is with, the Group on Earth Observations, the premier Earth observation organization in the world. And now we have an opportunity really to join forces again, to really think about a strategy, a pathway forward of how we bring together Indigenous experts who are challenged and are given the responsibility of taking care of their homelands, their ancestral homelands, and also preparing for a future that right now is uncertain. We have to think about, again, these policies and these practices. We have to think about these economic models that don't work now. What can we do differently that's going to really prepare the next generation of Indigenous people to deal with these issues? How do we develop training programs, capacity development to allow our youth to continue to forge ahead and bring together the Western science approach to understanding as well as Indigenous knowledge and ways of doing. We have that opportunity again today going forward. So we hope that what happens here today, with your input, with your guidance, and with your good thoughts, that we're really going to begin to think about an overarching strategy of how we do this work together. So we stand ready as a Geo Indigenous Alliance to come alongside you to help us understand how we do this work. How do we build a partnership that's going to be effective? How are we going to fund and resource these projects that you can hear about today? We're excited to have our hackathon participants come and talk to us today about the solutions that are working. I'm excited that they're here with us, and I welcome them as well. They're an important part of this work at the community level, where really the action really happens, really where the solutions are developed, and where the impact is felt. So let's have a good session today. And thank you for your time and efforts and everything that you do, your commitments to helping and working with the Indigenous people going forward. So with that, I want to say thank you. Wopila Tanka Chichiapalo. Thank you all very much. And back to you, Stephen.
Thank you as always, James. Wise words and a lot to think about as we go into the session. So now I'd like to welcome Tanya Trujillo, the Assistant Secretary for Water and Science at the US Department of the Interior. Tanya.
Thank you very much. I would also like to extend a heartfelt welcome and greeting and a handshake as well. So thank you for that introduction. I would like to thank the Geo Indigenous Alliance for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Department of the Interior. I am very happy to be working closely with Secretary Deb Haaland, who, as was noted, made history by being the first Native American to lead the Department of the Interior. Secretary Haaland is a great boss. She's a great coworker. She's deeply committed to science-based natural resource management and to amplifying the voices of Native Americans and Indigenous communities around the globe. The Department of the Interior manages 1 of every 5 acres of land in the United States. We have national parks and wildlife refuges. We have vast water resources and lots of natural habitat that we protect on a daily basis. The department is also home to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which has a long history of service to Native American peoples. I work very closely with the USGS, the US Geological Survey, and they do tremendous work, especially in this geo capacity and the mapping and space exploration work that we do, the Earth observation work. It is a pleasure to be able to see the impacts of our work on and to be able to address the impacts that climate change has been having on our Native people, but also on people throughout the globe. And it's great to see so many sessions addressing these issues. I know that this event brings together Indigenous leaders to be able to share their important stories. The Department of the Interior has been a longtime partner in these intergovernmental group efforts on Earth observations. We strongly support this Indigenous Alliance, and we support particularly the vision to protect and conserve Indigenous cultural heritage by using Earth observation science and the data and technology that revolves around it. The objectives of Geo Indigenous Alliance and several other Geo entities are mirrored in the top priorities of our Biden-Harris administration. We support free and open observational data and transparency in their use, and that is essential to meeting our common objectives relating to human health, climate, adaptability, and sustainable development. I am very excited to be working closely with the team at Interior, in particular relating to the recent launch of the Landsat 9 satellite and the Landsat mission. Way back in 1966, the Secretary of the Interior, Stuart Udall, announced the first US observation mission, and that is what we have been calling the Landsat mission. Almost 50 years later, recently on September 27th, NASA and the US Geological Survey launched Landsat 9. Secretary Holland and I were together in California to be at that event. That program is continuing the legacy of the gold standard of land use and land cover change monitoring that's occurring globally. And then as recently as last Friday, Vice President Harris was present to announce the first light images from the Landsat 9 satellite, which confirms the important role that the satellite images play in helping to witness the changes we are seeing around our planet as a result of climate change. And those changes are happening real time, as we know. The Landsat data is free and open and calibrated to the gold standard of scientific quality and is always continuing to improve upon the operational abilities in the cloud-based environments that you all are so able to utilize. Climate change is a global challenge, as we know. The temperature increases will strongly affect the human rights, the food security, and the health issues that we are dealing with on a daily basis. Through the free and open data policy that the Landsat images provide, we are able to help even all of our communities, but also the most vulnerable communities, be able to withstand and adapt to the extreme climate issues that we are dealing with, and issues such as drought and flooding and fire. And these tools are very important. Just for one example, the loss of permafrost in the Pacific Northwest, the sea level rise in the Southwest, and the issues that we see on our shores and our coastal communities, all of these issues are examples of how climate change is affecting us. We have a need to have the increased availability of our Earth observation tools to be able to help all of our communities. We have a goal of having a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive Earth observation community, and that helps our programs bring more thoughtful, meaningful, and innovative research and application to our teams. We know that it is essential, especially for women and girls and all members of our populations from all backgrounds, careers, and fields to be part of this larger community. I really appreciate the opportunity to say hello and to represent Secretary Holland today as part of these opening remarks. I wish you well with the additional presentations today and for your ongoing work on behalf of our beautiful planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary. Thank you, Tanya. That was fantastic. Thanks for the support for the Geo Indigenous Alliance and Geo writ large. It's greatly appreciated. And big congratulations on Landsat 9 and the open data, the continued open data program. And that's benefited tens of thousands, if not more, people globally. And also congratulations on having a great boss. That's also very good to hear. So now we're going to move to the final welcome, which is from Crichton Glenn from Geoscience Australia, and he's also part of the Geo Indigenous Alliance.
Hello everybody and welcome to this really important activity we've got going on today. My name is Crichton Glenn. I'm the Geo Indigenous Alliance advisor, and I'm speaking today from the lands of the Ngambri and the Ngunnawal people in southeast Australia, about 2 hours inland from the coast, in the capital city of Canberra. Today is going to be really important to share an understanding of what each other can bring to the table as far as education, skills, data and observations. Some of those will be very recent and some of those will be very traditional and ancient as well. Each has a very key role to play in the way that we look after our planet and as we have a look for our future generations. So with a balanced education and with the skills, particularly from those people who have walked these lands for many years, we'll be able to take informed decisions about what is the right thing to do next. It is important that we all share our information, and I think that having access to not only the data, but the data products in a way that people can actually understand and digest them is going to be really important. So data is not good enough, but actually the products that come from that data. And I look forward to everyone contributing to making those the best products available for all of the decision makers from local, regional, national, and international. So in closing, what I'd like to say is I absolutely salute your enthusiasm, your commitment and desire to bring about a deeper understanding and better decisions. I wish you all the very best over the next few hours as we listen and learn from each other. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Great, short and sweet, but very important. And so now we are moving to the keynote speakers, and we're going to start with Anne-Marie Shishile-Dine from the Navajo Nation. So great, we have your slides. I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, it's Bena. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie Shishile, and I come to you from my homelands here in Flagstaff, Arizona. These lands are sacred to 13 tribes in this region. And I want to introduce myself according to my clan system. I am Dine, enrolled with the Navajo Nation. And lay shanto ado chimbito a yisnasha akut dane and stanchna yate analto. Well, good morning. I'd like to thank the Geo Indigenous Alliance for this invitation to come speak to you. And I'm excited to talk to you about the program that I oversee here at Northern Arizona University called the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals. This is a teepee from the Northern Plains tribes. I think this comes from James Rattlingly's nations up north. And this sits in front of the Native American Cultural Center here on NAU campus. Let me see. Next one. So the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, also known as Itep, will be celebrating 30 years next year, where we served all 95%, about 95% of all 573 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And these are just a couple. As you can see, the state of Alaska has over 200 tribes, and we've been up there serving them on environmental capacity, teaching them about air quality, water quality, solid waste. Those are all your trash issues. We also talk about, developing policy, and we have a great internship for students as well. And one of our biggest and growing programs is the Itep Tribal Climate Change Program, which began in 2009, where we train all tribes in developing their adaptation plans for climate change. We host about over 20 courses a year, particularly in this area. We incorporate and protect traditional knowledges in developing their plans as well. And last year we had the National Climate Tribes and Indigenous Climate Conference, INTIC, where you can see a lot of the speakers on the side. And where a lot of them were from, we invited all countries to come speak. We have speakers from Kenya, from China, from New Zealand, and from all different tribes to come speak to and share the knowledge at our conference. And just to give you a heads up, in 2022 in August, we'll be hosting our second one. We also work on the National Climate Assessment here in the States, which is the official report that goes to Congress and talks to Congress about just what's happening on the ground. And we also have newsletters as well. I want to particularly talk about a new report that has just come out, the State Status of Tribes and Climate Change Report, affectionately known as SGAC. And it came out in August of this year, where over 90 authors who are tribal experts talked about this, put effort into this report. And we had over 30 tribal narratives. It's free. I'll put the link in the chat box a little bit later. But it was, most importantly, was shared with tribal policymakers. It was one of our co-directors, Nikki Cooley, spoke about this report at the US Senate hearing. And so it was firsthand account about what's really happening on the ground and what resources are needed. And let's talk about those unlocked resources next. So one of them is Google Earth. Tribes use this resource tremendously. I'm from the Navajo Nation, and one of the issues we're dealing with is a mega drought. For the last 20 years, this region has been in a drought. And one of the issues on my nation is the sand dune migration. On the left-hand side, you can see a map mapping out exactly what's been happening in real time and and then on the right-hand side, this is my hometown community of Keyente, Arizona, where you see sand dunes migrating so much, it's almost like a flood. It eventually gets to over roads and homes, affecting many of the tribal members in this region. Another example of Google Earth is looking at Newtok, Alaska. This is our northernmost brothers and sisters, and one of the issues they're really dealing with amongst a bunch of issues is rising sea levels. So the erosion of the coastline is seen in real time. And so one of the issues that we've been dealing with all these, and I recommend this, is making it scalable, taking the bigger issues like erosion or sand dunes or droughts and make it scalable where tribes can use or indigenous peoples can use in real time. Another issue we deal with at Itep is we develop air quality programs for the, in collaboration with the tribes, we work with them on developing their air quality programs. And so we help them go into the field and set up their monitors, develop a QAP, quality assurance procedures. And we look at how these sensors can be used in real time, like for forest fires, which has been happening quite a bit. This is the Colville Confederated Tribes up in Montana. And one of the issues that they've dealt with and they've worked really well with is looking at how these sensors can be used to really determine whether or not they need to bring their elders into safe buildings and children into safe buildings away from smoke. Because if they're at home, they'll get very, very sick. So these are some of the issues we deal with as well at Itep. And some of those air monitors in real time produce a lot of data as well as the water quality data. So one group that we also oversees the Tribal Exchange Network Group, where we share environmental data, we streamline data collection. This is all to increase quality and access, to reduce burden, and to support better decisions on the ground in real time for the tribes to work on. So this is one other area I'd really highly recommend that we work on with Indigenous peoples, is really developing great quality data systems where you look at not only protecting traditional knowledges, but also their intellectual property as well. The last thing I want to talk about is the guidelines for the use of traditional knowledges in climate change initiatives. So as you know, there's always the Western monitoring side of the house, but then in Indigenous world, you have your uncle who's sitting along the banks. This is in my region where we herd sheep all the time. And so just looking at these issues, I really want to say that these two knowledges are equal. And so when we took this to the Secretary of Department of Interior many, many years ago in 2015, we developed what's called the Guideline. And this was an official report that went to the Secretary and she approved it. So this was in policy set in place where we used the UNDRIP principles and the FPIC principles as well. So we were able to incorporate many of the UNDRIP principles into US policy and put them into place so that no one on the USGS enterprise can not see them as equal in the future. So that's my report. I just want to say thank you again for inviting me to this incredible session. I look forward to working with you as the director for the largest tribal training program in the United States. I welcome partnerships with all who's interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. It was really good to see your being able to see the before and after. I think that's one of the really big powers of Earth observation that people sometimes underestimate. Also, some of the stuff that you're talking about is stuff that the wider Geo works on. So there is a global wildfire information system within Geo, and I don't know if that's connected, and NASA is part of that with the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission and a number of others. So there may definitely be some areas for collaboration in there. So thanks again, and we'll move on to our next speaker. So now we have Rachel Smith, also from the Rosebud Sioux tribe, and Rachel is an Indigenous grant maker. So I'm guessing, Rachel, you're quite a popular person with a lot of people. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that should probably be clarified. I'm not an Indigenous grant maker. I'm actually part of a philanthropy serving organization that works with foundations and grant makers. So I'll address that a little bit more. But I just want to greet you all in our Lakota language, Shihanawashte, Rachel Amachi Yapi, Owak Pomani, Elson Changu, Ayate Pike, Hamataha, Nael Wa Ungile Wobila Hecha. So good morning, my name is Rachel Smith. I belong to the Sinchangu Nation, and I'm grateful for this coming together of this event today. I serve as the program coordinator for the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples, or IFIP. IFIP is the only global donor network dedicated to Indigenous people worldwide. We have about 50 partners that make up the IFIP network, including private foundations and public funds, as well as affiliate members who represent Indigenous-led organizations, including Indigenous-led funds. Our mission is to foster Indigenous solutions and partnerships among Indigenous people and funders around the globe. Through our programming and work with Indigenous partners and international donors, we strive to transform the relationship between the funding world and Indigenous people to one of mutual understanding and benefit. And our work is underpinned by the 4 R's of Indigenous philanthropy, which are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and relationships. IFIP promotes the urgent need for solutions that are Indigenous-led in order to solve some of our most challenging global threats, such as climate change and biodiversity loss. So in the lead up to COP26, IFIP hosted 3 webinar series focused on Indigenous people and climate change. We had Indigenous leaders from around the world come to discuss the intersectional ways in which climate change is impacting their communities and the Indigenous solutions that they are implementing to adapt to these climate threats. We provide these types of forums so that donors and Indigenous allies can hear directly how they can uplift and amplify the voices of Indigenous peoples at global forums, such as at the UNFCCC. So one of our webinars was dedicated to climate finance and philanthropy. And there were a few important points raised during that webinar that I've also heard echoed by Indigenous representatives at COP26 regarding some large commitments that have been made to support Indigenous peoples. First, I want to mention that just to give you a background on the different sources and mechanisms for what we call climate financing. And climate financing covers local, national, or transnational financing from public, private, or alternative sources that support climate mitigation and adaptation. So within the public financing sector, this would include bilateral funding from actual countries. There's also multilateral funding that represents programs such as the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility, also known as GEF, and the World Bank would be considered a multilateral funder. And then there's private funds, which includes bank, businesses, but also includes philanthropy. And there are also alternative forms of climate finance, such as carbon markets, where developed countries, the intention is that developed countries are supposed to be providing finance to developing countries. In terms of Indigenous peoples and climate financing, a recent study by Rainforest Norway found that Indigenous people have received less than 1% of climate financing over a 10-year period. And much of the financing that made its way to Indigenous people was actually directed through intermediaries, such as large international NGOs. And that's both for public and private financing sources. So this 1% in climate financing represents a huge gap, considering Indigenous people own, manage, use, or occupy over 25% of global land area, including 50% of forests and 80% of forest diversity, which holds 22% of all the world's carbon stores. So why is this? Why so little going to Indigenous peoples? There are a host of reasons, but what I want to focus on are the challenges for Indigenous people to access the climate financing, particularly this bilateral and multilateral funding. So the requirements for this type of funding are incredibly difficult. The reporting is difficult. So you typically have intermediaries, you know, the WWF, Conservation International, which are there to absorb some of the fiduciary and reporting requirements. But what is important to mention is that there are a growing number of Indigenous organizations that do have the capacity and experience to meet the fiduciary and reporting requirements of these type of public funds. And for example, Teba Teba is an Indigenous-led organization out of the Philippines that has experience working with the World Bank and countries to allocate funding to directly to Indigenous communities. So what we would like to see is more direct funding to Indigenous organizations and communities, but clearly these issues of access and challenges of and the challenging funding requirements must be addressed and solved to see direct funding to Indigenous people and Indigenous-led organizations. And the solutions can't just be to increase the capacity of Indigenous organizations. There also has to be adjustments in the grant-making mechanisms of these bilateral, multilateral institutions. There needs to be a meeting in the middle. This is why foundations need to sign on and get active in climate in general. Philanthropy brings three important aspects. They bring resources, not just in terms of money, but knowledge and expertise along with networks. The funding is independent of government, so they can set their own grant-making requirements. And lastly, philanthropy serves as an influence and impact many aspects of climate policy and funding. I do want to mention a couple of important commitments that were made leading up to and at COP that include both private and public funds. And this includes the Protecting Our Planet, which was made by a group of private donors, which included the Bezos Earth Fund, the Rainforest Trust, Gordon Berry Moore Foundation, and they committed $5 billion over 10 years to create, expand, manage, and monitor protected and conserved areas. And 20% of this pledge, or $1 billion, has been earmarked specifically for work with Indigenous communities. And then on the first day of COP, a historical commitment was made by the UK, Norway, Germany, and the US, along with the Netherlands, in partnership with 17 foundations that pledged $1.7 billion to support Indigenous people and local communities to protect the biodiverse tropical forests, which are, you know, incredibly critical to protecting the planet from climate change and biodiversity loss. So what is the plan for Indigenous people to access these committed funds? From what we've been able to tell, it's not been made clear yet how the climate funds will be made accessible, particularly funds from private foundations. There are some indications that with the public parts of these from these commitments, that it may be business as usual, maybe meaning that there will still be these fiduciary and reporting requirements that could impede direct funding to Indigenous people. So while this is a moment of celebration with these commitments, they aren't sufficient until they are translated into action. There's a widespread desire among Indigenous communities for greater transparency around the distribution of these pledges, as well as direct access to funding. And it's also important that free, prior, and informed consent be integrated into these grant-making mechanisms. And I just want to end with stating that with this increased, and a greater urgency and emphasis placed on the protection of forests and biodiversity, with increasing financing and new policies being created to protect forest ecosystems, it's important that philanthropic actors, whether it be foundations or governments, uphold the tenets of FPIC and take a human rights-based approach to ensure Indigenous people are not displaced or criminalized in the name of conservation. So Wopila Tanka Ikaye, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving me the floor.
Thank you, Rachel. That was actually really enlightening, because I've been trying to figure out all these different grants and everything that's been made available this week, and there's been so many different news items and things going on. So I think that'd be really useful for everyone else who's joined us today. But there will be some questions on all this. The final talk in this session is from Galina Angarova, who is actually one of our, who was part of the curation of this event with my colleague Diana Mastracci and others from the Geo Indigenous Alliance. Unfortunately, Galina had to go home early from COP26. So I hope we have a short video from Galina. And by magic, it's hopefully going to appear.
Stephen, I'm actually here in
Oh,
person.
you're there.
I connected, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think I have a, well, let's listen to the video first.
Seguli swagwag daisy niung yats on a wall, niwagi de lotam, onayade anga, niwagu hujontam. Hello everyone, greetings relatives. My name is Daisy Francor. I am a member and citizen of the United Nations of Wisconsin. And I just want to start off by saying and expressing my gratitude to GEO for inviting us into the conversation to really elevate and emphasize the importance of engaging Indigenous peoples in climate change, specifically as it intersects with Earth observation, technology, and data. In addition to being a Haudenosaunee Indigenous woman, I am also the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Communications at Cultural Survival. And for those who might not know, Cultural Survival is a veteran Indigenous-led Indigenous rights organization. And at CS, we advocate for Indigenous people's rights and Indigenous community self-determination and political resilience since 1972. We have 4 thematic focus areas, that is Indigenous climate change solutions, lands and livelihoods, cultures and languages, and Indigenous community media. And we support communities through a holistic wraparound approach, through grant making, capacity building, advocacy, and communications. And at CS, we support grassroots Indigenous solutions to protect, respect, and fulfill the rights of Indigenous communities. In our approach to uplifting Indigenous peoples, we center traditional knowledge to restore balance in the natural world. And as many of you probably know, Indigenous peoples, while we represent just 6.2% of the global population, we hold tenure over 25% of the world's land surface, and we steward over 80% of the world's biodiversity, as well as manage at least 24% of the total carbon stored above ground in the world's tropical forests. And areas titled to Indigenous communities have also shown to store 36% more carbon per hectare than public land. And so while I don't think these statistics are brand new to any of you that are joining us today, it's really important to emphasize that because oftentimes Indigenous peoples are sidelined away from these conversations and negotiations regarding climate change. And I think what we'll hear more today about is that Indigenous peoples, and specifically Indigenous women, we need to be centered in these conversations. We need to be, our wisdom, our knowledge, our leadership needs to be, and our rights, they need to be respected. They need to be centered, and they need to be resourced. And that's because as Indigenous peoples and as Indigenous women specifically, we are knowledge holders, we are culture bearers, we are seed keepers, we're water keepers, we're land defenders, we're many things. And we are the ones who hold the solutions to climate change because we are the ones who manage and protect our lands and territories and natural resources. And it's so important that our knowledge systems, our sciences, Indigenous people's sciences, need to be respected, and they need to be valued, and they need to be engaged in these conversations. For those who are familiar with the Paris Agreement, Indigenous peoples and traditional knowledge are referenced throughout the Paris Agreement, and yet here in Glasgow, Scotland, and at COP26, Indigenous peoples are not engaged as much as they need to be, as much as they should be in these conversations. There's a lot of dialogues and conversations that are happening about net zero and nature-based solutions. And I want to make very clear that those solutions are false solutions, because when you talk about nature-based solutions, you're omitting the social aspect, the intimate relationship between people and place, and you're solely focusing on nature. But it does not take into consideration that Indigenous peoples and local communities, we are the ones who steward our environments. We are the ones who know best of how to manage and maintain thriving ecosystems. And so I'm sure another topic that has been discussed and people have heard, whether you're here in Glasgow or not, is that over $1.7 billion has been committed to Indigenous peoples and local communities in addressing climate change. And while that is certainly a step in the right direction, I want to make also very clear that the member states that have been contributing those, or who have committed those resources, this is not new money. This is a redirected line item in their existing portfolios. And so what we need to see is financial resources going directly to communities to address climate change and to resource our leadership, our capacity, our technical assistance, and our self-determined solutions to climate change. And so with that, I'm really excited to hear the rest of the panelists here today who will really clearly illustrate why Indigenous peoples need to be at the forefront of this conversation, and really how we can integrate our traditional knowledge, our Indigenous sciences, our ancient technology with new modern technology like Earth observation technology and data. And what I also want to make very clear too is at CS, we believe that Indigenous peoples' land defense is a part of that solution. Indigenous peoples have the right to manage and steward our own territories in our own self-determined way. And as we continue to empower and support and resource Indigenous peoples' land tenure and the security of their customary land tenure and their rights over their land, we will see our environments continue to be protected. And so Earth observation technology and drones and a lot of these other technologies that will be discussed today is a part of that land defense. In addition, other examples, of course, include being able to document how their climates and their environments have been changing in their territories, which is also important to inform their self-determined solutions to continuing to ensure that their environments and that their livelihoods are thriving. So again, I'm really, really honored that Cultural Survival has been invited to this conversation, and very grateful for the opportunity to be here today and to listen and to learn from other Indigenous leaders here of how they're using this technology to address and adapt to climate change. Yawanko, thank you.
So Galina, would you like to say something?
Sure. Good morning. My morning, everyone. Unfortunately, I had to fly back home due to a family emergency, so I'm connecting from the Bay Area. I was in Glasgow from to the 29th of the last month, and I've witnessed incredible power of our Indigenous sisters and brothers who came from different parts of the world to advocate for the rights of Indigenous peoples, for our Indigenous climate solutions at this at the venue. I think that Daisy covered a lot of the points, and I heard to Rachel speak as well. And you know, we already have incredible leadership in the field who can speak very profoundly and very beautiful to the force and to the wisdom of Indigenous peoples. What I want to add is that Indigenous women are an incredible force, and we have a gift to the world. It's the millennia-old traditional knowledge of our peoples. We do not only carry water, we do not only carry babies, we carry solutions, we carry the future. We are not only mothers, grandmothers, sisters and daughters, we are also water protectors, land defenders, seed keepers. We support our families, and we know that 90% that are invested, that are come to our families in the form of income are being reinvested by Indigenous women into their families, into their societies and communities. So I think that there's a lot to talk about, but I just wanted to emphasize that point. On $1.7 billion pledge that we've heard during the COP, it's also important to emphasize that the majority of funding that will come through bilateral is not new money. It's the official development aid program. So I think we have to think really carefully about how this funding is going to reach out Indigenous communities, because I'm afraid it's not. And if we work together to think about the accountability mechanisms for reaching that funding directly to communities, I think we need to strategize, we need to work together on that, because it's from the funding from bilaterals again. And I've talked to a lot of the Indigenous leaders who were at COP, is not new money, it's official development aid money. That will come with a lot of restrictions, with and you know, a lot of our organizations do not have that capacity to write hundreds and hundreds of pages of application forms to access that funding. But I do welcome the pledges from the philanthropic sector, the 17 foundations who have pledged to support Indigenous communities. I think it's just a huge achievement in philanthropy, and I hope it continues. I think that's it, you know, and if we have any more questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Galina, for making the time to come in and add those important points. I think there's some great stuff from Daisy as well that will hopefully come up towards the end. So it's now about on the ground Indigenous projects, and first up, we're going to go to Roxy Williams, who is Mosquito from Nicaragua. Roxy, are you there? Sorry, I see Katia Pena is back online. So Roxy, if you don't mind, I'll stick with the original agenda, and I'll go with Katia. If Katia, are you there?
Olá.
Hi there.
Hello.
I'm here.
Sim?
So
Yes.
you're going to have a translator live.
Yes, I am here with Katia, and I'm going to translate. I'm also a Quilombola, and she'll do the presentation in Portuguese, and I'll translate it.
Okay, obrigado.
Thank you.
Aqui eu posso me apresentar? Sim, sim. Ok. Eu sou a Katia Penha, sou coordenadora nacional da CONAC.
My name is Katia Pena, and I'm a national coordinator for CONAC.
Vou apresentar o mapeamento de resistência, territórios quilombolas no Brasil.
We are going to present the mapping resilience, the Quilombola territories in Brazil. The CONAC is a national coordination for the articulation of Black rural Quilombola communities. Next slide, please.
Nós somos 2,5 representante da população brasileira.
So who are we? Quilombola communities of Brazil. We are 2.5% of the population of Brazil.
Somos autodeclarado como grupo étnico-racial.
Quilombolas are a self-declared ethno-racial group.
Embora alguns descendentes embora alguns sejam descendentes diretos de escravos africanos fugitivos que estabeleceram os quilombos, nem todos são.
Quilombos are self-declared ethno-racial group, and although some are direct descendants of escaped African slaves who established settlements, not all are.
Nossa relação única com o território é o caminho histórico de resistência para a nossa própria identidade.
Their unique relationship with the territory and historic path of resistance are key components of their identity.
Somos agricultores familiares, extrativistas, dos recursos naturais de nossos territórios.
Most are family farmers and extracting natural resources from their territories.
A maioria vive em áreas rurais e suas terras são propriedades coletivas.
Most live in rural areas and their land is collective owned.
As comunidades se organizam através das associações, que são as instituições comunitárias tomadoras de decisão.
Communities are organized under associations which act as decision-making bodies. This is a quilombola from Tocantins, Lajeado, Gianópolis. Please pass the slide. Please, next slide. Yeah, this picture is for the quilombola of Tocantins, the community of Lajeado. Next one. This is a quilombola from Mato Grosso, Mata Cavalo, Mutuca community. Next one, please.
No fim da linha, na garantia dos direitos territoriais.
At the end of the line, granting territory right.
Somos 3.386 comunidades certificadas no Brasil.
We are 3,386 certified communities in Brazil.
1.774 em processo de reconhecimento aberto no INCRA. Desses, 84% não saíram da primeira etapa para a regularização fundiária.
1,774 of these are in open recognition process in INCRA, and of these, 84% did not come out of the first stage.
Somos 16 milhões de quilombolas em mais de 3.300 comunidades no Brasil.
We are 16 million of quilombolas and 6,300 communities.
0,11% do território nacional tem comunidades tituladas.
And the entitled quilombos are 0.11% of the national territory.
A CONAC foi fundada em 1996. É uma organização sem fins lucrativos de âmbito nacional que representa os quilombos do Brasil.
Next slide, please. This is a brief history of CONAC. The CONAC was created in 1996 and is a non-profit nationwide organization representing the quilombola in Brazil.
Nosso objetivo é lutar pela garantia de territórios coletivos.
In the next slide, we can see our purpose, that is to fight to ensure the collective and common use of the territory.
Pela implementação de projetos de desenvolvimento sustentável.
To fight for the implementation of sustainability development projects.
de políticas públicas levando em consideração a organização das comunidades do Quilombo.
For the implementation of public policies, taking the organization of Quilombo communities into account.
Em defesa da educação,
For the defense of Quilombo education.
Autonomia das mulheres,
For the leading role and autonomy of Quilombo women.
a permanência do jovem,
For the permanence of youngsters in Quilombos.
e pela defesa dos recursos naturais no meio ambiente.
And for the protection of natural resources of the environment. Next slide, please.
Please.
Next slide, please. Next one.
Esses são a apresentação de vários jovens que foram capacitados pelo projeto Compartilhando o Mundo.
This is a picture of some young Quilombolas that has been capacitated by some project called Compartilhando Mundos, in English, sharing words. Next one, please. Our biggest talent.
Nosso maior desafio é o reconhecimento oficial de territórios quilombolas.
Our biggest challenge is the official recognition of traditional territories.
2 mapas brasileiros.
Next one. In the next slide, we can see 2 Brazilian maps.
Municípios que têm comunidades registradas do lado esquerdo.
In the left one, we got the Brazilian municipalities with certified Quilombola communities.
E municípios brasileiros com comunidades com titulação total ou parcial.
And in the right one, we got the Brazilian municipalities with Quilombola communities.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Nossas ações com os parceiros.
This is some of our partners and actions we make.
Treinamento de ferramentas treinamentos e ferramentas com a plataforma Google com o Data ODK.
In partnership with the Google Earth and Open Data, we'll have done some tools training.
Capacitação e análise de dados.
Collected data and analysis workshop.
Criação de dados integrado e de propriedade das comunidades do movimento quilombola.
Creation of integrated and proprietary data from the communities and Quilombola movement.
Esse projeto foi atuado nas 6 regiões do Estado brasileiro.
Please, next slide. This project has been done in 6 states of Brazil.
Okay.
Okay, next one.
Jovem sendo capacitada.
This is a picture from young Quilombola being capacitated.
Nossos resultados desse projeto.
Next one, please.
Atuamos nos 6 estados da Amazônia.
These are the results of our project. We operate in 6 states of Brazil and Amazon, and now in additional 6 states of the Cerrado, Caatinga, with Porcas, link Quilombola territorial management to climate change and biodiversity.
Participam mais de 140 comunidades quilombolas do Brasil.
More than 140 Quilombola communities participate.
Mais de 1,5 milhão de hectares de gestão comunitária melhorada.
More than 1.5 million hectares of improved communities management.
231 quilombolas capacitaram e que passaram a treinar outros quilombolas.
We've trained 231 quilombolas who have gone on to train others.
Mais de 800 jovens quilombolas, lideranças que estão capacitados da área.
More than 800 quilombola and leaders in the field are being capacitated as well.
Hoje nós temos 250 jovens quilombolas formados em análises de dados.
And we have today more than 250 Quilombola training in data analysis. Next slide, please.
Por onde andamos? Por onde atuamos?
This is one of the picture of we have been. This is Mata Cavalo community in Mutuca. Next slide, please.
Nossa atuação foi atuar no levantamento da geração de renda das famílias quilombolas,
We need to act in the profit generation of this families, Quilombola families.
sim,
Next one.
acesso à água,
The access to water. Next one. Next one.
todos esses dados
Next one, please. Yeah. Well,
todos esses dados serão todos esses dados estarão dentro do sistema chamado SEDOC, que é o sistema da educação de documentos quilombola.
so we've done a project called Quilombos and Quilombolas in the Amazon, the Challenge of Recognition. And we've done a documentation center that is called SEDOC. In the next slide, please. This is the main of SEDOC, and this is the main map of SEDOC. There will be it will be available in the next month. Next one, please.
Temos um vídeo que gostaria muito que todos assistissem, mas estará na bio e está no YouTube, desse projeto que foi a capacitação dos jovens no levantamento de dados.
We have a video, but sadly we will not be able to show to you right now, but will be the link will be on our bio in the Instagram, and we will share the link with you. Next slide, please.
Nossa estratégia é reconhecer os territórios,
This is some of our strategic components. The first one is the official recognition of traditional territories.
ADPF, Resposta à Pandemia Quilombola, é a campanha nacional de vacinação.
The ADPF is in some kind of Quilombola pandemic response and national vaccination campaign.
Segurança alimentar.
The food security and Quilombola family farming.
E mitigação das mudanças climáticas e biodiversidade.
And mitigation of climate change and biodiversity.
Obrigada.
Thank you. Next slide. That's all. Thank you.
Muy obrigado. Thank you very much. I think to put this in context for those who are maybe not part of this Indigenous partnership, 16 million people is more than Scotland, where we're sitting right now, Norway and Sweden combined. So it's a very large community. So that was it was fantastic you could share that with us. So thanks again, Katya. And I know you have to run. I know you're busy, so we really appreciate your participation.
Obrigado, e contamos com a colaboração de vocês. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much, and we account with the collaboration of all of you guys.
And thank you for your translation as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are going to go back to Roxy. So Roxy Williams, who's from Mosquito, from Nicaragua. Roxy, can I pass over to you now?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
Perfect.
Great. First of all, Tita Nyamni, Al Sutra Naksa. First of all, thank you so much and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I am so happy to speak on behalf and also about my community during this session. My name is Roxy Williams. I am the national point of contact for Nicaragua in Space Generation Advisory Council. And I will be speaking a little bit more about how my community, the Mosquito indigenous communities, has been affected, of course, first because of the climate change, and also how is the status of the education in the community. So I'm going to start in that part first. So there are many issues that we are facing currently, but I will focus on three main issues. One of them, the first one, is the lack of education and quality education, which causes a huge gap or inequality in the community and also between other cities in the country itself. The second issue is most of the community doesn't know about Earth observation data, have no access to them, and don't know how to interpret it. So that's a big issue, because I will now touch down on the third issue, which is more on how the climate change effects are affecting the whole community through different natural hazards. So as the community is not aware exactly of, they are of course facing and they have to go through the different natural hazards. However, they fully don't understand or fully are not aware of the whole issue itself. So I'm going to touch down a little bit on that too. So some of the effects of natural hazards in the community, of course, how climate change is affecting hurricanes, which is the main natural hazard that always affects the community. And it used to be, so there is a season specifically where there are hurricanes in the country that hits the country. And it used to be an average, it used to be one hurricane or storm by year. However, now with the climate change effects, now there are more hurricanes and they are even more powerful. So as you can see in the image in the right side, the damages are bigger, are more stronger and more difficult for the people in the communities. And I will use a little bit some more examples that I will touch down later on. So the higher wind speed or from stronger hurricanes, there is more rain in area from more moist atmosphere. So there is so many things that are affecting the community. And these are just some of the images of how the effects go through, and specifically on the right, in the bottom of the top right photo, I will explain more on how that specifically picture is about. I will speak a little bit more about also Hurricane Eta and Iota, how affected the community, specifically this one. So I will start by one example, Hurricane Mitch, which has been the strongest hurricane and the one that has left more disasters in the community and many deaths. Then there's the second example I have, Hurricane Felix, and I can remember and recall perfectly when this hurricane happened because I was around 10 years old when this happened. I remember exactly how we used to use churches and schools as shelters, which are not safe at all. And we used to see how many people died, how many houses were destroyed. And it was because of the same issue, of course, climate change. And I will speak also a little bit of how climate change is actually affecting hurricanes specifically, and also how hurricanes are created or started. The third example is Hurricane Eta and Iota. These ones happened in 2020. Hurricane Eta made landfall affect many countries of Central America and also the Caribbean countries. And it made landfall Eta in November 3rd, and then Iota made landfall in November 16. And these two hurricanes made landfall in the same place or village in my community twice. I mean, Eta made landfall first, and then Iota passed through the same place. So you can imagine how the disaster was. So hurricanes are now stronger than ever, as I was mentioning, and some of the causes of hurricanes are warm water, moist warm air, light upper level winds, and of course, the warm ocean water. As the temperature of the sea is getting up and up, of course, the hurricanes, and there are more storms and hurricanes are stronger, and which are a big issue for the community. Now, is the community safe? Is the community aware of the issues? And there is where it brings me. So the community, as I mentioned, my community uses churches and schools as shelters, and they are not safe. The community is not fully aware of the issues. When I mention these, I say it because there is an example of the community Halover when Eta and Iota passed through, and the whole mangroves that surrounded the community was destroyed. The well goods water were contaminated by salt water, and the whole community here, as you can see in the image, it was destroyed completely with the ocean because of the hurricane itself. So the community, as they are used to, or the villagers, as they are used to live in the coast, as that has been their home for many years, they don't want to, or they are not used to be inland. So that is a main issue, and I believe having access to Earth observation data and also having that possibility and access to education to learn what are the issues and to understand the issues itself will help the community to also understand that it's safer for them to go inland, because as now with climate change, and of course there will be more hurricanes coming in the future, I'm pretty sure, and also the effects will be even worse than if it has happened before. And the community is not fully strong. They don't have full structures or stronger structures for them to be safe. And part of the project that I have been working on, and I will mention it later on, is to create a way to collect data that we could find places to build shelters as well, and safer shelters, because the community itself needs to find places where there can be, it won't get flooded, and also places where their houses or they can be safe. I have also had the opportunity to be part of recently in the Space Generation Congress, which was held in Dubai, and thanks to a scholarship, I had the chance to go, and in the working group that I was part of, we were speaking about how it's important to use space technologies for climate change and also sustainability, and also how all of this data that we collect, EO data, all of the geo data that we collect, how is important for the communities, the local communities, to have access to it, because we know, and many of us have mentioned it, we are from the communities, we are the ones who know the issues as well. So it is great that also the whole industry as well will let us use the knowledge that we have, our ancestors' knowledge, and also combine it with the modern technologies. For example, I am very passionate about satellites, and I believe it's really important for them to have access to that too. So we were discussing on the importance of also building a sort of lab that will let the people to at least understand, and to also they be able to share what they have seen, the issues that they have seen, and how they believe us as community, we can solve some of the issues or take actions for the issues that we are facing in our community. So as I was mentioning, Hurricane Eta was a Category 4 storm that impacted the Northern Caribbean and also Central America itself. And that was in November 3rd, and Hurricane Iota which was a Category 5 storm, impacted the same area on November 16. Some of the disasters, as I was saying, the whole Halaber community was destroyed, and the villagers had to go inland, even though they didn't want to, but they had to, because as you can see, the whole village was destroyed. And the surrounding mangrove forests that supplied protection and nourishment to the village were battered and broken. So as you can see, it's a big issue, and I have lived it, and I know how problematic it is. And I remember seeing many of my people crying and be really worried because they were not a safe place to go. And in that sense, also, it's really important for them to, besides having education, because also when we speak about geodata, EO we are also speaking about education, because if we bring all this data to my community, they will have access to education and a chance to also solve different issues that we are facing. And I am very happy, and I am really happy to say that I have had the chance to have access to it. And I want to also bring this data and these opportunities to my community also, that they can be able to access through it. And what are some of the future development and actions for it? As I mentioned, I have been working on a project that I hope to work, and I've already been working and been in contact with the university called Huracan in my community. They have some scientists and also ecologists who are very into analyzing, developing, and also creating the data, collecting it, and also sharing the information, because there is a short video that I wouldn't be able to share, but if you can look for it, and I can also leave it in the chat. When the New York Times made the study, there is a video where you can see the villagers and also the ecologists and people who are involved in the environmental actions taken in the community. They see the images, and actually this image was taken from New York Times site, where they took a picture using a drone just to collect this data and show how was affected the community. So that is basically my presentation. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate again for the invitation. I am very happy to be here, and we are here as communities and as Indigenous community to take actions and show all the potential that we have been involved in, specifically space and geospatial. And I am very passionate to say that I'm very passionate in the space industry, and I am glad to say that I am working on this, and I am sure that I will find great partners here so we can work in the future also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roxy. The Space Generation, the Advisory Council, SGAC, is great, and it's really great to see you bringing the two things together in terms of the communities. In the chat, I've shared Geo, the Group on Earth Observations, was recently included in the WMO State of Climate Services report, the annual report they published. And actually, we used an example of ETA and IOTA and GeoGLOS, our Global Water Sustainability Initiative within the Geo Work Programme, to talk about the work they did to help save not just livelihoods, but also potentially lives from the work they did using the Earth observations to monitor water levels. So please have a look at that, and thank you for sharing all of that. That was fantastic. So,
thank you. Of course, I will have a look at it.
So now we're going to move to Tanya Martinez Cruz from Ayuk in Central America. Tanya, do we have you with us?
Yes, I'm here. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy that I'm learning from a lot of initiatives around the world, and especially led by many Indigenous peoples too. So congratulations on that. I want to talk specifically from the food sector, like we call it. I work with Indigenous peoples' food systems. And as you know, indigenous food systems contribute to the 30% of the greenhouse emissions. So while we need to ensure that we provide food to a growing population, we also need to ensure that we are doing or having good practices that help us to reduce the impact that we have on Earth, because most of the agricultural policies have focused on intensive systems rather than other systems. And one of the things we try to do is to highlight, and when I say we try to, I'm talking from the experience of the Global Hub of Indigenous Peoples Food Systems that we have at FAO, but that it's made up several organizations, Indigenous peoples. And part of the things that we want to show is how Indigenous knowledge is crucial and can be a solution for the climate crisis, the food crisis that we are facing too, but also how it can be combined with other technologies. So we say that Indigenous knowledge is crucial in the sense that, for example, I will talk about this more tomorrow in another presentation that I will have with cultural survival, and how Indigenous peoples knew or had their own observation systems, but we are killing them. I'm not saying I'm against modern technologies, but I think just recalling the work of the researcher of Northern University of Arizona, I'm trying to recall her name, Anne Marie, would be wonderful if we could combine what we have as traditional knowledge, but also with other technologies. Because I think it's important, yes, to have the current tools that we are using for observation, but at the same time, how is that actually combined or was observed by our communities before this technology comes to happen? Many of them, for example, in a project that we had with the Mayan people in Yucatan, we documented how Mayan people, through observations, were defining agricultural calendars. And one of our suggestions is like, yes, it's important that we have weather forecasting systems that can help them and advise when is the best planting day, when you should be harvesting, when you can perform some practices, but at the same time, how you could combine this with a lot of the knowledge that is already in the communities. So another project we are working with, it's with our home communities and also in Oaxaca, where I am from in Mexico, on how land use change has also affected or been affected by mainstream policies, because mainstream policies have tried to push indigenous food systems, and instead of making or helping us to be more resilient, like many of our peoples have been, they are actually eroding our systems. And with this, our ability to preserve the biodiversity, as one of the speakers mentioned before, it's so crucial for not only for our territories, for our people, but for the world. But also, what are the drivers that are actually shaping the land use change, but also these systems and the way they are being eroded? So we are still at the stage of gathering evidence. So I wish I could share much more insights like some of the colleagues did today. But those are some of the things we are working on. And I think my invitation would be also to partner with some of the great works that I'm seeing. Because when we talk about our environments, it's not only about preserving nature or preserving, let's say, the sea or the forest, rainforest, the desert, but it's also about preserving our food systems that are so interlinked, but also that can help us or help our people to be resilient over the time. So I'm just gonna leave some links here in the chat box, the email. If you want to reach out and learn what we're doing in the Global Hub of Indigenous Peoples Food Systems, I would be more than happy to also welcome other people that wants to collaborate with us.
Thank you very much. And the chat box is only really for the presenters. So we'll make sure that KTN and the others share that more broadly. I did put something in the chat as well about GeoGlam, which is the Global Agricultural Monitoring Initiative within Geo, which FAO is already contributing to and supporting and guiding. So there may be some more work there, because we've started speaking to them with the Geo Indigenous Alliance as well. So thank you very much. And I guess we'll probably see you again tomorrow as well. And now it is, so now it's another member of the Geo Indigenous Alliance. It's Mario Vargas Shacaim from the Shuar Nation in Ecuadorian Amazon. And so Mario is going to speak, and Diana Mastracci from the Geo Indigenous Alliance is going to do the translation. So buenos dias, Mario. ¿Está aquí? Perfect.
Hola, Mario.
Mi nombre es Mario, trabajo para la Cueca como coordinador de un proyecto Todos los Ojos en la Amazonía y también soy cofundador de la Alianza Geo Indígena.
Welcome everyone. My name is Mario Vargas Shakaim and I'm the coordinator of the All Eyes on the Amazon project at COICA, which is an umbrella organization of all the indigenous organizations of the Amazon Basin.
Next, please. La COICA es una organización indígena que está ubicado en Sudamérica en 9 países, en donde habitan 511 indígenas, 66 pueblos indígenas en aislamiento voluntario, y en toda la cuenca amazónica habitan 2.5 millones de indígenas.
So COICA is this umbrella organization for indigenous communities, and it covers 9 countries in Latin America. In these 9 countries, there are 511 indigenous nations and thousands of communities, and 66 people living in 66 communities living in voluntary isolation. And
next, please.
Next slide.
Bueno, esta es una imagen de pueblos indígenas de diferentes pueblos que defendemos la Amazonía.
And these are several images of different indigenous tribes who are safeguarding the Amazon rainforest.
Next, please. Bueno, en la actualidad estamos elaborando nuestros propios mapas para poder organizar, planificar nuestros territorios. Estos son elaborados mediante reuniones o mingas o talleres por propios comuneros, pero sin embargo, para poder avanzar, nuestro propósito es contar con conexiones de internet y equipos para poder hacer mapas en programas un poco más avanzados y más profesionales.
So right now we are making our own maps to map our territories through local workshops by our local people. However, if we want to advance, we need better equipment, better software, and internet connectivity.
Next, please. Bueno, ese es un pensamiento para nosotros la Amazonía es la casa de todos, la casa donde habitan muchos conocimientos, muchas sabidurías y muchos pueblos con sus conocimientos y costumbres.
So for us, this is a quote. It's a thought, and for us, the Amazon is a house for all the wisdom, for all our culture, for all our traditions.
Next, please. Actualmente tenemos un grupo de jóvenes de la Nacional Shuar que se han capacitado en elaboración de mapas, manejo de drones y también manejo de GPS, con el propósito de hacer nuestros propios mapas y poder aprovechar adecuadamente nuestros recursos.
So at the moment, we have trained a group of youth in how to use drones and how to use GPS and how to make their own maps. And in order to better use our own resources.
Sí, siguiente.
Next.
Next, please. Bueno, en la Amazonía estamos iniciando, contamos con un proyecto que se denominaba NUMI, pero sin embargo este proyecto tuvo su conclusión en este año y estamos empezando un nuevo proyecto que se va a llamar un proyecto SGAC.
So in our region, we were currently working on a project, on a reforestation project called NUMI, which recently completed, and we are currently working on this new project called the SGAC project.
Siguiente, next please.
Next.
El proyecto SGAC tiene algunos componentes para su implementación. Son 4 como el componente científico, divulgación con los jóvenes, programa de radio sobre plantas medicinales y restauración del Amazonas.
So the SGAC project has 4 main components: a scientific component, an outreach with the youth, a radio program on medicinal plants, and a reforestation component.
Por ejemplo, en el componente científico, lo que queremos es también tomar en cuenta los conocimientos científicos, puede ser que nos puedan ayudar en la temperatura, de medir los efectos del cambio climático, pero también, sin embargo, que los conocimientos de nuestros sabios puedan ser tomados en cuenta.
So for the scientific component, we want to use scientific data and tools to help us to better understand climate change, but also to reinforce our own indigenous knowledge.
Lo mismo podemos decir que el conocimiento científico nos puede ayudar a través de los datos satelitales a visibilizar, a dar seguimiento sobre la situación de nuestros bosques.
So through the scientific knowledge through Earth observation data can help us to give us a better understanding of what's happening to our forests.
Como segundo componente del proyecto, la divulgación con los jóvenes cumple que habrá espacios con los jóvenes y también con los mayores para difundir los conocimientos relacionados al cuidado de nuestro patrimonio.
So for the outreach with the youth, there will be dedicated spaces where the youth and elders will be able to interchange knowledge on our own practices.
Igualmente, los jóvenes pueden crear mapas interactivos y aprender a interpretar los datos de satélites y también de los drones.
At the same time, the youth can learn how to create their own maps and use the drones and the scientific data.
En el componente 3 tenemos el programa de radio sobre plantas medicinales. Aquí se hará una difusión a través de una radio comunitaria que cuente nuestra organización, donde los jóvenes pueden divulgar y también nuestros mayores puedan hacer sus difusiones para que la juventud pueda conocer sobre las plantas.
So we're going to use we're going to have a radio program to share the knowledge of the medicinal plants between the elders and the youth.
En el componente 4, tema de reforestación de la Amazonía, como experiencia, la Cueca contó con un proyecto denominado NUMI, que es árbol, y queremos empezar y queremos dar continuidad con este proyecto.
So with regards to the last component, the reforestation of the Amazon, as I mentioned earlier, we counted on a project called NUMI, which means tree, which was a reforestation project which currently ended, and we want to continue.
Este proyecto incluirá a mujeres, a jóvenes, ancianos dentro del trabajo de restauración en las áreas degradadas de la Amazonía, con plantas nativas como pueden ser frutales, medicinales y maderables.
So this NUMI project will include both women, youth, and elders in the reforestation of degraded lands in the Amazon.
En cuanto a las áreas y países dentro del proyecto, tenemos como consideración a Ecuador, Perú y Bolivia.
And we are thinking about including Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador.
Next, please. Bueno, lo mismo invitamos a la comunidad internacional que para cumplir este proyecto necesitamos recursos de apoyo y también la implementación de Internet, la implementación de equipos como drones, computadoras, GPS.
We were asking the international community for support in order to purchase technology such as drones and software, and to continue to restore the Amazon.
Muchas gracias por la atención. Un abrazo desde la Amazonía.
Thank you very much for your attention. A big hug from the heart of the Amazon.
And so now we have, muchas gracias, Mario. Now we have a short video from Kilak Inuriak Strauss from the Arctic region.
Hi, my name is Kidlak Inuriak Strauss. I'm from Iqaluit Nunavut, and I'm an outreach coordinator at the Arctic Eider Society. Today, I want to talk to you all about SIKU, the Indigenous Knowledge Social Network, and the work we are doing towards preserving and sharing Indigenous knowledge. SIKU was created as a collaboration between the Arctic Eider Society, an Inuit-driven charity based in Sanikiluaq, Nunavut, and Inuit hunters, elders, and youth, as well as software development partners and sponsors. SIKU is being used by Indigenous communities for ice safety and monitoring, accessing weather, tides, and Earth observation information, GPS functionality, harvesting and wildlife observations, local projects and research, and mobilizing environmental terminology and place names. It is an innovative one-stop platform for all Inuit to share traditional knowledge and practices relating to subsistence, sustainability, and safety. We truly believe that Indigenous self-determination and sovereignty are the keys to relevant, accessible climate action. And we know that Inuit women are the leaders of this climate change action. We are upholding a sustainable economy using traditional practices like creating art, clothing, and food using biodegradable animal products every step of the way. The impacts of climate change are not just environmental, but are social and will have lasting impacts on the well-being of Indigenous peoples, as well as our roles and structures in society. See, traditional Inuit gender roles are as versatile as they are distinct. To live in the Arctic, individuals have always had to be well-versed in all areas of survival, regardless of gender. Men knew how to sew in case they needed to fix clothing or supplies while out hunting. Women knew how to fish and to provide for themselves and their families while the hunters were gone. Navigation was a skill that all children were taught from the moment we could walk and talk. These images are of my grandmother and my great-great-grandfather. Their combined knowledge is being passed down to my generation to ensure that we are safe and prepared for Arctic conditions. And while they are from North Baffin Island, I grew up in South Baffin. Even so, my mother made sure that I knew all of the landmarks, all of the mountains, and each inlet and river around Iqaluit. This knowledge, embedded in us from such a young age without maps or a GPS, gives us a sense of security and confidence while traveling on the land. But what happens when our land starts to change? Inuit women have seen the ways permafrost melt has led to our land sinking. We see invasive plant species growing taller and spreading farther, leaving less space for our traditional medicines and foods. We see the changing condition of animal furs and bodies, with the introduction of more and more contaminants, parasites, and species in their diets. Sea ice is freezing and breaking up in new patterns at different times, which greatly impacts Inuit ability to travel safely to procure food and resources. Not only is the window for travel becoming shorter, but it is also impacting the conditions of animals. Seals, for example, lay on sea ice in the spring during their molting season. Since they have less time on the ice, their fur is often patchy and not as durable for seamstresses to work with. Our knowledge of the land, animals, and weather patterns are being challenged as these things, which we are taught to observe and predict, are becoming less and less predictable. It is so important to be able to keep track of such changes and to be safe on the land and ice as we navigate a world that is shifting faster than we can imagine. SICU shows that by working together, Inuit are demonstrating that communities can lead science and climate change monitoring, management, and more, in ways never seen before and not accomplishable by traditional Southern research methods. For example, the Arctic Eider Society has worked closely with the Hunters Trappers Association and Hamlet of Senekilok towards establishing Keynote, which is a community-protected and conserved area encompassing the Belcher Islands archipelago, and more than 300,000 hectares of land, sea, and ice. Keynote will protect unique marine and terrestrial habitats and the wildlife that rely on the islands, support a local conservation economy, and be managed through Inuit-led stewardship programs, governance models, and management plans using the SICU app. Another way that SICU demonstrates community-led data collection is with Ice Watch and ice observations. Ice Watch is a seasonal competition for all users to document ice conditions using the extensive Inuktitut sea ice terminology available on the app. This allows people to see current changes and possible dangers on sea ice while traveling, whether it be to hunt, fish, camp, or just for fun. And while the competition is only open for a few months, ice observations can be made at any time of the year. SICU provides a low bandwidth platform for remote Indigenous communities to access up-to-date satellite imagery, including synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, and multispectral sensors like Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, Landsat-8, and MODIS. And we even have our very own SICU ice map, which combines our ice observations with radar imagery and ice charts, providing information about ice conditions even when it's dark or cloudy. The SICU ice map makes Earth observation imagery accessible to all, even those without the training to interpret satellite photos. Some key pieces of information that Inuit hunters look for on our SICU ice map include locations of the flow edge, polynyas, thin or thick ice, rough or smooth ice flows that may block boating activities, slush or water on the ice, and ice conditions suitable for certain types of animals. This is a picture of what I know as Ayura, but many other Inuit dialects would call Imannissak. Having one app to hold all of this traditional information and meteorological information is going to be crucial to Indigenous sovereignty in the Arctic, which in turn is vital to all climate action. It's time to invest in Indigenous knowledge and ways of being, which have always been 100% sustainable. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. We look forward to one day providing our services to all Indigenous communities across the North.
So thank you to Kilak for that, and hope people can take up our offer to use the approach that they're taking. We're almost run out of time. We still have to go through the Indigenous Hackathon. So I'm proposing that we continue for another 20 minutes. Each of the next sessions are a little bit shorter, and we go on for until like the sort of towards 4:30. So I'm going to hand over now. I mean, I guess to give the context, a number of speakers have talked about combining traditional knowledge with modern tools. And I think that's been at the heart of what we've tried to do with the Geo Indigenous Hackathons. And so Diana Mastracci from the Geo Indigenous Alliance has been working very hard on these and bringing it all together. So I'm going to just hand over to Diana. I'm actually just going to turn my screen because she's sitting next to me, and I'll let her say a few words before I introduce the first speaker.
So thank you very much, Stephen. And it's an honor to be with you here today to introduce you to the winners of the Indigenous Hackathon that we ran last month. So what are the Indigenous Hackathons? The Indigenous Hackathon methodology is a new way to co-design solutions using collective and crowdsourced intelligence and the ancient wisdom of Indigenous people to solve local issues that have ripple effects across the planet. The methodology unlocks the power of Earth observation data by taking into considerations the community's desire to increase intercultural communication between their youth and their elders, as well as with their scientists, and intergenerational knowledge transfer, and enhance their own local culture. So we ran our first Indigenous Hackathon in the North Slope of Alaska in 2014, and we have been running Indigenous Hackathons every year since then. And I can't wait for you to hear all about the solutions that came up in our recent Indigenous Hackathon. Thank you. Over to you, Stephen.
Okay, so I'll swing the laptop back round. And our first speaker is going to be Joanna Dimitrova. So, Joanna?
Hello to everyone. My name is Joanna. Can you hear me well?
Perfect.
Okay. So I will just share my screen and I would present our project and the presentation. So our team has been working with Titus from the Samburu County, and unfortunately he couldn't be here today, which is a shame, of course. But so yeah, our project is called the Namanak App, and our team at the beginning was slightly different, with Miroslava being part of it at the beginning, very beginning. But how it all started, well, firstly, let me introduce the Samburu. I think that would be better. So our project at the moment is a collaboration between, of course, the group and Earth Observations. Because of the hackathons, it emerged from the Indigenous Hackathon in last year, and Titus and the Samburu submitted a challenge in there. So Titus is also part from the Sarara Foundation, which is based in the Samburu County. And the Samburu County itself, as you can see, is located in north central Kenya, and it's characterized with arid and semi-arid climate. It's receiving very low and unreliable rainfall. So they're suffering from very often from drought, and finding water is really important for them. And the Samburu themselves are semi-nomadic and pastoral community, and their subsistence economy is based on the herding of livestock such as cattle, goats, camels, and sheep. And they would move from place to place following the rainfall in order to search for fresh pastures and fresh water for the livestock. So the traditional lifestyle has been altered, of course, by climate change, as we all heard, and also by the pandemic. So what happened is that we participated in the hackathon, which was organized by Diana in June 2020. And at the beginning, Titus and the Samburu submitted a challenge in which they were interested in an application that will allow them to map their land using a unique combination of 3 words: which would have been in the local language and using local knowledge. And having discussed that with Luca Andrea, who's part of our team, he suggested that we could use the first letter of the word. However, this changed and we decided to use symbols instead. And all of the symbols are, well, they were drawn by a local artist whose name is Stephen Lisiacono. And as you can see, they're all local animals that the Samburu could easily relate to. So this part has been really fundamental for the project as it radically changes the way mapping has been done previously in the area. And because of the Samburu language is oral, that's why we decided to use symbols instead of using words or letters that have no meaning to them. So in a way, we try to empower them and we try to make this app as close to their culture as we could. So we further digitize the symbols, as you can see, on Adobe Illustrator and try to keep them as close to the original as possible. As I said, the choice of those symbols has been linked to the traditional knowledge systems. And as you can see, we have a gravy zebra, a buffalo, a wild dog, and a great kudu. And the elephant is a very big part of Samburu culture, and Titus is part of the elephant clan. That's why we also, in our logo, we also decided to put an elephant in there. Essentially, what the app would do is, this is just a mock-up design of the app, and it's a little video which it has changed. So the app essentially uses satellite imagery, so it's not going to be Google Maps, of course, so that the Samburu could relate to their landscape much easier, because if it's satellite imagery, they could choose. At the moment, the person is just choosing 4 symbols, and then the app would locate where the person would be from those 4 symbols. So the first 4 symbols would locate where you are, and then if you type the next 4, you could find another person. Essentially, the app would transliterate geographical coordinates into the 4 symbols so that Samburu could relate easier, and they would be empowered to map the land in their own culturally relevant way. So for now, the app looks like that. So as I said, these are the 4 symbols where we are, or where the person holding the mobile phone is. And then the second part of the symbols is where you would want to look for someone or something else, and you could see where that location would be. At the same time, we also have written names of the animals in Samburu, Swahili, and English. And if you double click on each icon, you would have an audio saying the names again in Samburu, Swahili, and Swahili. What we believe is that the app
Joanna,
would...
can you start to wrap up, please?
Yes, of course.
Thanks.
I'm sorry about this. So yeah, we believe that the app would empower the Samburu in terms of visualizing the land in a culturally relevant way, also documenting the land as well, in a way in which they would know, and it would increase and educate the Samburu in terms of using new technology and mapping, and it would really ease the communication between the Samburu as well as local stakeholders, the government, people who take decisions. They would be the ones who will be involved into the decision-making process of their land. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna. That's fantastic. Now we're going to move to Bernard Odiambo and Miroslava Alunowska. If we can, Bernard, I think you're there.
Yeah, I'm there.
If you can please stick to the 4 minutes so we can give everyone time to speak, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think we summarize our slide enough so that it can cover the 4 minutes. So let me share my screen. So I'm presenting together with Miroslava. Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Bernard.
Yeah,
so,
welcome. You can proceed, Mira.
Yeah, so we're going to be presenting Bernard and I the NAPU Ntomonok app, which in Samburu language means empowering women. So this app is also based in the Samburu area. Bernard Obiamo and Miroslav Lonovska-Fiera were the team leaders, but we have other developers. So what is this app? So this is an app that will allow the women of the Samburu community in northern Kenya to locate moving markets, moving hospitals, and local dispensaries. Below we have 3 images of how the app looks like. In the first one is how they upload by voice where a market is going to be taking place. In the second one is giving a route of how to get to that market or hospital or local dispensary. And the third one is the SMS service that we're also providing, because not always they will have access to Wi-Fi. So why did this app, why are we creating it? Well, this was a challenge submitted by Lilian Guracha. And the reason is that at present, information is shared through word of mouth. Thus, people learn about a market or a moving hospital late, and it takes time to prepare to make it to the map, to the market or the hospital. It can take up to 2 days to reach a market or hospital, so receiving information late makes them lose time and resources. And this also leads to members missing the medical services or other important events they would be looking for. So how are we solving this problem? The solution addresses technology access constraints, and it also caters educational levels. There are older generations that they might not be able to read in English, so we're including some functionality to address these issues. So which are these functionalities? The first one is that it receives notification when a user adds market location or an information. This is particularly relevant when a phone is turned on. Usually they will be turned off to be charged, or if they have been off the grid. It also includes voice notes option of an event. As we shared in the first screen, they can just click a button and then can just record where an event is going to happen, and someone else is just going to be hearing it. Then it also captures the location or the coordinates of an event, so it's going to be easily tracked. We're going to have an USSD and SMS enabled, so that would mean text services. And it also incorporates graphic symbols. So these are going to be designed by the community members. As Joanna mentioned, Samburu language does not have written words, so we're going to be using also images. Therefore, you will also have some data governance in which the community managers and members will have access to an Android smartphone, and they will be the ones who will be adding the events. So now I'm handing over to Bernard, who is going to be talking about our ask. The floor is yours, Bernard.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Miro, for that good elaboration. So as Miro has said, those are some of the features the application and service are supposed to offer. So in order to actualize this application, there will be need for hosting services. This is for our backend and also data storage, since the community leaders will be uploading data which is being saved and before it's transmitted to other community members in their feature phone. So also, since SMS services are being charged in Kenya, so any application which is sending SMS to users or SMS notification to user, they need to be hosted somewhere or be provided by a certain provider, which big company provider doing this service in Kenya is Talking Africa. So also to actualize this system, you'll need funding services for that feature. So some community members, as also we are aware, do not have access to smartphone, either Android or iOS, with the capability of taking photos, recording voice, and adding map feature services like locations. So we'll also be requesting the community at large also to help us give these community leaders smartphones so that they can easily notify their members of events going on. Also, due to unstable grid in the area, as you have seen from the previous presentation, is located in the northern central part, and the area is always characterized by electricity load and also network issues. So this one also will need solar panel or solar rechargeable power bank to keep the mobile phone running. Also on the community data requirement, since this application will be data intensive, uploading photos, voice recording, or even adding coordinate location on the map require data. So not all community leaders will have access to data for them to add this information. So also to actualize this, we'll also need to provide them with those data so that can access the geospatial tools. Funding also to cover capacity building in the community, also to train community on how to use geospatial data, and also how to leverage this app to add other events, as the one I've said, when there's drought and being provided with water services through moving trucks, they can also be able to track these services. So the development team are doing this one on voluntarily, so they are not charging for their services, but they need your support so that this app can be actualized in the community and help the community grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. Right, we're going to move on quickly now to Aurelie Shapiro, Andreas Volrat, and Philo Gomez. And I just want to also to let everyone know all of these different solutions and apps and stuff that you're hearing about from the Indigenous Hackathon, we will put together a blog post that will go on the Geo website, and then we will share across multiple different platforms. So there will be more exposure and you will be able to read about it. So Aurelie.
Well, thank you for this presentation. My name is Philo Gomez. As we learned from Roxy's earlier presentation about the Mosquito Indigenous Coastal Indigenous communities, the vulnerabilities relating to climate change and weather extremes. Since the early 2000s, the Mosquito communities have experienced 6 major hurricanes. The latest of 2020 are the Eta and Iota, with category 4, destroying many livelihoods. This presentation aims to identify suitable locations to build hurricane shelters for the villagers to use and take refuge during the hurricane events, especially in the surrounding communities in the Halover. My colleagues Andreas Volrat will talk about the methodology performed to create the application, to find the suitable locations to build the shelters, and Aurelie will give us a demonstration of the app we created. Thank you.
Thanks, Philo, and pleasure to be here. So during the time of the hackathon, in this 2 to 3 days, we addressed this problem by what we call in geoinformation overlay analysis. So we identified different tools and data sources that we basically can use to identify suitable spots for those shelters. The first data set we used was created with FAO's CIPOL platform, where we used radar data from Sentinel-1 satellite in order to identify historical flooding, specifically from the Eta and Iota hurricanes. So basically that we can exclude those areas that have been flooded during past events. The second part is basically a combination of transformed elevation into landforms, roads, and also water bodies that were used to generate criteria that we consider are crucial to identify those safe spots. And so in terms that you, in terms of elevation, you want to be rather on a peak, you want to be close to a road so it's reachable, and you probably want to be further away from the coast in order to be safer from flooding. And we combined those criteria. If all 3 criteria are met, we basically have the highest suitability. If 2 of them are met, we have a medium suitability, and if only 1, it's a lower suitability. And you can see in our app here that you can also visualize those layers. They're loading basically live based on Google Earth Engine. And the final result, it's just loading now. You can see that basically we have a very basic map that shows those suitability areas. And what we heard, so the interaction with the indigenous community is very crucial. And this part is part of the app and will be presented by Aurelie. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Yeah, so we take the information that was derived by Andreas and the team, to put the suitability on a map and provide it in a more interactive scenario. So just an example of what this could look like for somebody, who wanted to look at shelter locations. First, you can look at information on recent hurricanes or whether there's actually a live hurricane coming through, things like that. And then we have a couple, let's say, just examples of safe shelters that maybe people have provided that would give information on what kind of shelter there is in this church, for example. And then more interactively, you could actually zoom into the map and say, get a list of all of the shelters that are nearby. So let's say there's 4 shelters here. And you could also, let's say, provide a location on the map. For example, I'm here, and I could, within a buffer area, get the number of shelters that are nearby and how far they are. So I can see how far each of these shelters are. So this is more of an interactive situation on where people could, get information on where to seek shelter. This could be available on a mobile device. And then finally, people can submit their own knowledge. For example, they could say that there's a church, that has a terrible roof, and it's not a good place to go. So I would say it's bad. You could take a photo. I could find out where that is, put it on the map, and then actually submit it. And it would update the map live that we see above. So it would update the map with those locations we just saw. So at the same time, we're providing the suitability analysis and locations of shelters with Indigenous knowledge that we can glean from the community. So this is our demo app. I put the link in the chat if you want to take a look, or feel free to submit some data and update our map to see how it would work. The only thing that remains, we should notice that we would like to translate the app into Spanish, of course, and then work closely with Roxy to make sure that this is the kind of information that should be visualized and collected.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And you should also look at the GeoGlows link I put in for ETA and IOTA, because I think we should probably get you to speak to them as well. They have some models and some algorithms and methods that I think could definitely be complementary. Okay, the penultimate or second last speaker now is going to be from Yangju, and this is a video, and then we have Cruz to close off the session. So if you could play this video, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yang. I'm very happy to be here at the Geospatial Virtual Pavilion COP26. And today I'm going to talk about the second project. So the goal of this project is to recognize the contribution of Indigenous people on climate change mitigation and emphasizing the benefits of reforestation. So there are 4 components of this project. First, the scientific component, which weaves together Indigenous knowledge of climate change with scientific data. And second, outreach with the youth, which there will be special workshops that the elder teach the youth on their Indigenous knowledge related to nature conservation. And third, radio programs on medicinal plants. And the last one, reforestation of the Amazon, which involves 400 hectares of reforestation across 3 different countries. Here is the web application I created for this project. So through this web application, people can learn more about this project and support this project by donation or adopt trees from the Amazon. This web page allows people to adopt a tree and then monitor their tree growth on the interactive web map. So if you select a tree, there is a unique tree's ID, which people will get after they adopted a tree successfully. And if you know your tree's ID, you can search it here, such as 10042. And then it will zoom to your trees, and you can look at the images of your tree so you can monitor your tree's growth. And there is also a satellite image available to allow people to look at the extent of the Amazon forest. And the last page is a page that the indigenous community can use to share their videos or audios of their knowledge or news on this project. So for this project to be implemented successfully, there are some resources that are needed. First is the internet. So the access of internet allows people to use this web application, and then cell phone and computer that let people to use this website and upload data and keep track of the trees has been adopted. And also GPS devices that can take the trees coordinates, so they can add this point data to the interactive web map. And last, cameras that the indigenous community can use to take pictures of the trees, so they can upload it to the web application and let people who adopted trees to look at their trees. They can also use the camera or cell phones to create videos or audios to share their knowledge of the Amazon through this web application. That's all for my project, and thank you.
Great. Okay, and so now we move to our final speaker of the session and of the day, which is Cruz. And once again, Diana will do some translation. Hola, Kiado.
Hola, Padiush, Shkalangle, Igoteler Senagalani. Hola a todos, a todas. Gracias por escucharme y gracias también por esta invitación de estar aquí.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm delighted to be here with you.
En el hackathon me tocó resolver o más bien dar una solución a un reto que presentó James sobre la Lakota App. Y en esta resolución tratamos de combinar dos percepciones del mundo.
So in the hackathon, I solved James Ratcliffe Lee's senior's challenge, the Lakota app, and in this solution, we tried to combine two different perceptions of the world.
La solución se llama más bien Lakosap, es una combinación entre Lakota y Zapoteco. Se trata principalmente de generación e intercambio de conocimiento entre dos culturas diferentes.
The name of the solution is called the Lakota app, from the word Lakota and Zapoteco, and it's an interchange of cultures between the Lakota and the Zapoteca culture.
Y justo llega en el momento exacto para hablar también en el tema de la crisis climática que nos une en este evento.
And we solved it right in the exact time of the climate crisis and this big event that is happening right now.
Uno de los problemas que compartimos, James, los Lakota y los Zapotecos, es que los conocimientos cada vez se ven más reducidos sobre la Tierra, porque también la crisis climática afecta a estos conocimientos.
So one problem that we have in common, the Lakota and the Zapoteco, is that the indigenous knowledge is being affected by climate change.
Por citar un ejemplo, diría que muchas palabras en zapoteco se han perdido porque también se han perdido mucha diversidad biológica en este contexto.
For example, many words in the Zapoteco language have been lost because we have also lost a lot of biodiversity.
La crisis climática nos afecta a todo y por eso nos preocupa.
The climate crisis is affecting everyone, and that's why we're very worried about it.
Y hoy quisiera aprovechar este foro para hablar también de este tema.
And I would like to take the opportunity to also talk about this important topic.
Creo que uno de los puntos que compartimos los pueblos indígenas que estamos aquí es que no somos causantes de la crisis climática.
I think one of the points that unite all the indigenous people is that we are not the cause of climate change.
Pero compartimos la preocupación por el planeta en el que vivimos.
But we share the concern about the world in which we all live.
Ustedes se preguntarán por qué compartimos esta preocupación. Yo digo que hemos vivido una relación de despojo.
So you might wonder, why are we sharing that we are concerned about the world? It's that we have been living in, ¿qué dijiste después? Estamos viviendo una situación.
Una situación de despojo.
No sé cómo decir eso en inglés.
Una situación de
Despojo. ¿Me puedes decirlo en
Disposition.
Ajá. O disposición.
Thank you, Philo.
Y en ese sentido también hemos conservado nuestro entorno y nuestro clima.
And we have been maintaining our culture and our environment.
Y por otro lado, hemos servido como un medio de acumulación por otras empresas y gobiernos.
And on the other hand, we have served on the hands of big corporations and governments.
Entonces yo tengo preguntas, ¿no? ¿Cómo se considera la participación de los pueblos indígenas en el diseño de las soluciones frente a la crisis climática?
So my question is, how do we incorporate the indigenous people in the solutions to the climate crisis?
Porque en mi comunidad o por los pueblos zapotecos tenemos una forma colectiva de tomar decisiones.
Because in my community, the Zapoteca community, we have a collective, we come to solutions in a collective way.
Y en ese sentido también tengo la pregunta, ¿cuál sería la estructura de la toma de decisiones para resolver la crisis climática que nos une?
And this brings me to the question, what would be the structure to come up with solutions to the climate crisis?
Yo creo que en este sentido tenemos derecho, como pueblos y comunidades indígenas, a participar en la mitigación de la crisis climática.
And I think we have the right as indigenous people to participate in the mitigation of climate change.
Y en ese sentido quiero situar unos retos, principalmente primero el reto del lenguaje.
So I would like to tell you about some of the challenges that we're experiencing. And the first one is the challenge of language.
El reto del lenguaje principalmente es porque muchos de los conocimientos producidos es en español o en inglés y en otras lenguas.
Because most of the knowledge, disculpa, ¿puedes repetir un segundo?
El reto que vivimos es la exclusión de la lengua porque mucho de la producción de contenido es en inglés y español y en otras lenguas.
So the challenge is the language because most of the production of knowledge is created in other languages.
Y en ese sentido también vivimos una exclusión técnica porque la tecnología que llega a nuestras comunidades no es de punta o no es de solución mucho más actual.
And that leads us to also to a technological exclusion because the technologies that reach our communities are not always locally relevant.
Y también el lenguaje de programación se ha vuelto como un lenguaje sagrado para muchos de los pueblos indígenas.
So the programming language has become a sacred language for many of the indigenous communities.
En ese, tenemos un reto nosotros para inventar nuestro propio lenguaje para programar. Inventar un nuevo lenguaje para programar en nuestros retos.
So we should make up a new language to program in our own indigenous languages, a new programming language.
El segundo reto que apunto aquí serán los datos abiertos por los gobiernos y las empresas. ¿Cómo podemos acceder a ellas?
The next challenge is the data that is, how can we have access to government data and other agencies?
Y el tercer punto, reto que llego aquí, como dije al principio, los pueblos indígenas se rigen por forma de colectividades. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos o cómo se resguarda la soberanía de datos indígenas?
And the next question relates to indigenous data sovereignty.
Entonces, pues, quiero ir cerrando con esto. En este sentido, quiero decir que los conocimientos indígenas tienen que ser regenerados en un contexto de crisis climática.
So to conclude, I would like to say that indigenous knowledge has to be regenerated in a climate change context.
Y en ese sentido, considero que es muy importante la participación de los pueblos indígenas en estas soluciones.
And that's why I think it's critical that indigenous people are part of the solutions.
Y porque los pueblos corremos mucho más riesgos que las empresas canadienses o europeas que contan en este territorio oaxaqueño.
Because the indigenous people, we have many more risks than the companies the European companies or the Canadian companies that are in our lands.
Se trata ahora de compartir los riesgos en un mundo postcolonial.
So it's about sharing risks in a post-colonial world.
Y quiero decir o apropiarme de una frase del movimiento indígena en México en los años 90.
Can you wrap up now?
He's wrapping up, yeah. And I would like to finish up with a quote from the indigenous movement in Mexico from the 90s.
Nunca más una decisión sobre los pueblos indígenas sin la participación de los pueblos indígenas.
Never more a decision about indigenous people without the participation of indigenous people.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Keado. And a very strong close to a very extended session, but thank you to everyone who stayed through to the end. I just want to thank all speakers, all people who have contributed, not just today, but to the Indigenous Hackathon and to other aspects with the Geo Indigenous Alliance. And for those who haven't been part, invite you to join us and participate and come in and look at the Geo Work Programme and how we can align some of the activities around food security, water sustainability, urban and peri-urban and rural activities that are very much linked to the Indigenous communities. So you're able to connect to network with other speakers and book one-to-one meetings and also send messages via the Space and Geospatial Virtual Pavilion for COP26, where you are right now. And it started on the 1st of November and it's going through to the 11th of November. So you can do that on the event platform. You're also encouraged to visit the Geo and Cultural Survival Exhibitor information page for the remainder of the time when this is going on. And I guess most of you know Diana. She is really from the Geo Secretariat perspective, she's the lead person for the Geo Indigenous Alliance. So thanks again for everybody for speaking, for attending, participating, contributing in very many different ways. We've captured a lot of the challenges, the messages, and the opportunities. And as I said, we will put together a blog post for this latest round of the Indigenous Hackathons, so you can learn more about these great tools and apps that have been done. So thanks again for your patience, and I wish you all a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, wherever you are. And thanks for joining us.